Good morning, everyone, once again to our weekly broadcast. It's yet again 10 a.m. on a Thursday. We're back with our roughly 30-minute update and information on what's happening in the property market and interesting panel discussions. So let me first of all welcome our panel this morning. First of all, Amanda, how are you? Good morning.
Morning, good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, fantastic. And Mark, how are you today?
Not bad, David. Are you well?
I'm absolutely fantastic. And one of our regular contributors and panelists, and dare I say, property developer celebrity, Mr. Ed Morgan. Hi, Ed, how are you?
Good morning, everyone. I hope you're.
I would say money spinner.
Money spinner. That's a
good morning, everyone. Hope you're having a good start to the day.
Yeah, we are indeed. Everyone's logged in with their cup of coffee. I'll be looking forward to this. So let's get straight into it. For any of you who happen to be joining us for the first time or watching the recording for the first time, my name is David Johnson. I'm the CEO of a company called Leo Crowdfunding, and we're an equity property crowdfunding platform. And we put these on a weekly basis, really to build up a library of interesting discussions around property, really regarding education. We want people to get the benefit of tuning in either live or through the recording and learn all about property and things that are interesting to them. My regular co-host and property expert, particularly regarding compliance and deal structuring and creative finance, is Mr. John Corey. I'll let him introduce himself.
Yep, John Corey, Property Fortress, long-term property investor, US and UK. Started in the US in 83, maybe 84. Actually, I guess it was January 84. And then UK was about 10 years after that, 94. So seen a lot of ups and downs, market cycles, one-off events like cladding issues and market crashes, market, phoenixing out of the ashes and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's a sector that rewards those that are in for the long term.
Excellent. Good to have you on again. Of course, you're joining from America. So it's an early morning for you. So thanks again for joining. So we've one slide before we get straight into the panelist discussion today on planning. We're looking forward to it. But we always do a brief market update, really just to set the scene or to give John an opportunity to highlight something that's particularly relevant in the preceding week. And John, what caught my attention was this from Property Week. Retirement group Olley secured a 59 million loan from Silbury Finance. So what caught my attention with that was, John, I know something that we talk about so much, is that newspapers lead the agenda with either doom and gloom or how well things are. The pendulum seems to swing massively either way. But even the current situation, last 3 or 4 weeks, everyone's talking about the potential crashes and disaster around the corner in the property market. And really, this wee image caught my attention, that it really depends on how you look at things or where you are in your current property journey. So if someone was on an island marooned looking for escape and they see a boat coming in the distance with someone's arms waving, they think, yay, I'm rescued. But that person could be in a boat having just survived an ocean liner sinking, and they're looking for land. So they're all excited because they've found land with somebody on it. So everyone's saying the market's about to crash, and here's someone willing to lend 59 million. So observations, John, please.
Yeah, I think you got to be careful about what you see. So the boat versus land, I noticed there doesn't seem to be source of water or any food in that island. So I'm not sure it's going to work out so well. And then now there's 2 people consuming scarce resources, and they have to share space and get in each other's face. So one of the things you'll notice, particularly in the more sort of not broadsheet versus tabloid press, but when you look at the tabloid press, they're more into sensational headlines and all the rest. And David just did that. This sounds like a refinance of a company that's struggling. They needed a 2-year bridge on existing assets to cover future sales. Well, they have 2 years more to sell off some more units. I don't know if this is indicative of anything at all. 75% loan to value sounds a little high for what should be more or less a commercial loan. This is a retirement community type business from what it says. And at the same time, you have to is this at 2% interest or is this at 22% interest? So we don't know anything about whether this is a good or bad sign from a loan point of view. And I don't think it has anything to do with whether the housing market, we say the market, we mean the housing market, and whether it's going to crash or not. And why does a crash matter? This is not at all that sector. This is actually retirement homes and communities. So we're talking about the prices of avocados to figure out whether bananas are a bargain. So
exactly. And again, you've
yeah,
nailed it.
David.
You've nailed it as you usually do. There's so much information behind the headlines that people need to be aware of. You can't just read a headline and then draw conclusions from that. There are lots of factors behind the headline, and again, it depends where you're coming from, perspective on that. So again, it's just sort of can't use the word advice, obviously, but an educational tip is obviously do not be devising your strategy or changing your strategy just based on headlines, particularly in the press. So
yeah,
take time
and
to
I
look at
mean,
all the
this
information.
could also be a perfect sign that this company, this is they're doing well. They're moving off their construction finance onto a term product while they finish selling out what is essentially a slower burn type product. Elder care type communities they're not like owner occupied. They don't sell the same. They don't have the same economics. I'm assuming that's the type of target audience.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It's definitely, you got to get good at digging into the detail and doing the due diligence and forming a view about what does this mean, but what is being left out. Many times the person writing the article, right after they finish this, they did one on wine, then there's another one they'll do on jewelry or something. So it's not necessarily the deepest researched article.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. So there we are. That was the market update. So for today, let's get into our panel discussion. Really looking forward to this today. Delighted with the Ed, Mark, and Amanda are able to join us. So what we're going to do is let each of them have a minute each, so sort of slide for them, and then we'll get straight into the discussion. There's going to be a lot of value today because of the various experiences all three of our panelists have. So if you have any interest in planning at all, then grab a pen and paper if you can, or go back and watch the recording. But there'll definitely be some really insightful information from our discussion. So first of all, Mark, you want to go first, please, with a quick sort of history background, and then I'll mention your project that you have coming up.
Sure, thank you, David. So my name is Mark Afeeva. I'm the founder and managing director of Danelise Homes. Thank you very much for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be here. I've followed Leo crowdfunding, I think, from its inception in late 2019, early 2020. I remember us having discussions then about what you were looking to try and do in terms of the property market and the equity funding space. And I'm quite keen to work with Leo crowdfunding because my background as a lawyer means that I have always felt that organizations that do things in a strategic way are those that are more likely to succeed. And we at Danelise Homes have adopted that approach throughout our time of operation. We are developers who focus primarily on London and the Southeast. And like all SME developers, we do place a premium on producing a quality product. And we have very recently come across an opportunity in Surrey, in Caterham to be precise, where there's the opportunity to pursue a planning uplift project. We are working with David and his team on that project at the moment. I think he's going to expand on the detail in a short period of time. But in essence, we are very excited about it. We've got quite a slightly unusual exit lined up, and we genuinely think that it's a novel opportunity for those who have a slightly wider risk appetite to get involved in crowdfunding.
Okay. Yep. Okay, Brian, thank you for that. That's a good starter for 10. And as you mentioned, you do have a project that's currently coming soon that will be view deal in due course. People can go on and leave their email address and they may be interested in investing when the information comes out and they have a look at it. So you are able to go on and record your interest to make sure you do get the information when it all comes out. So next, Amanda, I'll let you introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Thanks for having me again. Good to be here. So my name's Amanda Olley. I'm a planning consultant, town planning consultant, obviously, and I represent and advise planning gain experts who are looking to bring some projects to the market, planning uplift, effectively optimising land and development values. I've got quite a varied planning background, started off in local government. I've worked for developers and more latterly for the last 10, nearly 15 years now, I've been a planning consultant in consultancy, largely working in residential development, but actually across the board. There's not a lot I don't advise on from a planning point of view. Yeah, so
perfect. Yeah,
there's not a lot I haven't dealt with.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's really good, good starter. So, and Ed.
Good morning. So I'm a property developer come property investor from Bristol, Southwest. I've got a fair bit of experience in the full aspect of the development process, from meeting and greeting and knocking on doors of landowners and doing my very best to appraise the value and the potential, to negotiating agreements to take it forward into a planning uplift scenario. And normally it would be a case that I'm taking on the planning with the view to develop it. I'm not normally selling it on to other people. I'm looking for land that I can build on myself, because I'm a builder by trade, and it keeps me busy, keeps my pipeline going in the local area.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that. And you've obviously had some projects that have funded on the platform. You've had one on the right there, Avon Valley's actually paid back to the investors, and that did have a planning uplift. You obviously had a planning aspect to it. You took it through planning before coming to the crowd to help you buy the site. And then you've actually just had a planning uplift project that you raised on our site be approved. So I know you're preparing to pay back the investors on your Winterbourne Down project in Bristol. If anyone wants to, you can go on the platform and look at the equity offer document that Ed used. So that will give you an insight into what Ed's actually done and how he successfully achieved planning. So before we get into the sort of the questions that the panelists have been given, Amanda, I thought, given your background, this is probably a good place to start, because sometimes people discuss planning but maybe don't even understand, if you like, the wider context, like how is planning even organized in the UK, who's responsible for it, who makes the decisions. And again, I like the graph on the right, just in terms of how little of the UK is actually built on. So yeah, over to you sort of for a summary of the process.
So, well, in general, very general terms then, so the decision making on a site-by-site basis is made at the local authority level, usually for most developments. So whichever local authority area you are within, they'll have a planning department, and anything requiring planning permission, you submit your applications to the local authority. They're the decision-making authority. In terms of how they administrate that or process that, they're guided by national policy is set, general policy is set at the national level, that filters down to the local level, and the local authorities are tasked with preparing their own local development plans that bring forward the policies that are specific for their areas. That's both in terms of promotion of development and land for development, whether that's for housing or commercial, whatever it may be, but also policies that will seek to protect certain areas of land in certain areas as well, and protect existing commercial areas or green belts, any other sensitive areas, conservation areas, listed buildings. So all policies are there to control, to promote development, but also to protect certain areas as well. And that's administered through the local authority area, and that's the basis that they use for their decision-making process when a planning application is submitted. We do work, it is a plan-led system, as it's always referred to. So the development plan is the starting point for the consideration of any planning application. It goes a little bit off-piste from there, but that is the starting point.
Okay, really good. Thank you for that. So I want each of you in one sentence to tell me. Sorry, go ahead, John. Do you want to make a quick
I
comment?
have a question, and this from Amanda, as the professional expert in this space. So I've heard two phrases, planning uplift and planning gain. I was told by some people who had graduated in some academic subject close to planning or directly in the planning space that planning uplift is the value increase and planning gain is effectively the tax that the local government collects, that when property investors refer to planning gain, they really mean planning uplift. Is there a distinction?
You can look at it in those terms. I mean, in general terms, for me, planning uplift and planning gain can be one and the same thing. It's just slightly different terminologies for the same thing. But yeah, if you're talking specifically, say, to the local authority, at the local authority level, and they talk about planning gain, they will mean in reference to specific contributions that they will also seek in relation to a development. Yes.
Okay, got it.
Good. Okay, thanks. That's good clarity. So one sentence for each of the panelists. We'll start with Mark, then Ed, then Amanda. So one sentence on what you think the current situation of the planning market is in relation to sort of what your experience is.
One sentence: the current planning system is not fit for purpose.
Says the lawyer. Cool.
Indeed. And the lawyer has three fact-based reasons why. Number one, it takes too long. Number two, it's too expensive. Number three, it's too complex. The biggest challenges are the fact that...
Hang on, sorry, 1 second, Mark. Hold
He's
on.
doing the whole slide,
Apologies.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll go on the challenges. So let's just see exactly kind of where you're coming up, which is brilliant. Ed, so one sentence, please.
For one of these questions?
No,
one
for the
sentence
first question.
on
Just the
your
first
view on the current planning situation in the UK.
Well, it's unbelievably slow for the layman. It's hard to describe how slow and inefficient the process is. That's one of the biggest challenge for me is explaining.
Hang on. Hold the challenges. We'll come back to that. So we've got what Mark's comments really good, and then Ed's slow and inefficient. Amanda.
Well, they're both good comments and are reflective of what the situation is. But from my point of view, having been in this myself for over 20 years as a planning professional, in terms of the current situation, it's no different. It's getting slightly worse, but it is no different to what it has been for the last 20 plus years. Is the reality.
Okay, yeah, good, interesting comment on that. So now we can get into the sort of biggest challenges and why. So if I want, then Mark, so we'll give you a minute or so, and then again, if any who's on the attendees, if you have any questions or comments, stick it in the Q&A, and John and I can keep an eye on that. And John, if you want to deep dive on anything, go ahead. So Mark, yeah, you've laid out what you think. So why? So why, and what are your biggest challenges?
So it seems like a lifetime ago now, but in Boris Johnson's election manifesto in 2019, the current government promised to build 300,000 homes per year. I think 2021 data shows that 220,000 were built. So there's an 80K shortfall. And that's been the case for a very, very long period of time. And as Ed touched upon, the primary reason for that is that the process is so long and unwieldy and cumbersome that most SME developers and even some of the big boys just don't have the stamina or the resources to persist to the bitter end. What that means, therefore, is that for those of us who are in a position to push through the barriers, come what may, when planning permission is obtained, we then have a premium product, essentially. We have lands that has consent, and developers, builders will often pay a premium for that because they understand that they're able to shortcut the whole process. So from us as developers who are in the position to take things through from A to Z, it can be a great thing, but it is enormously challenging and taxing. And the really interesting thing is that successive governments, successive prime ministers, because we've had so many in such a short period of time, all make promises to try and address the flaws and inefficiencies in the planning system. But the current government has the issue that so many of its MPs are in the shires. They have Greenbelt constituencies, and they're worried about their constituents objecting to increased house building in their constituencies. As a result, those MPs put pressure on the government not to pursue radical reform. And as Amanda indicated, the status quo persists for decades.
I mean, Amanda, that's an interesting comment you made there, and I'll give you a chance to deep dive a bit more into the sort of the why of your analysis and any sort of big challenges. But the fact that there's a big focus maybe now post-COVID that, you know, it's broken, it's you know, it's so slow. But in your experience as a professional, yeah, it might ebb and flow a little bit, but really the same problems have persisted for many years in your opinion.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, it is very much, well, the biggest problem is because it's easy to use the planning system as a political football, which effectively is what Mark is alluding to. So every time I hear the words radical planning reform, the country probably hears the thud of my forehead on my desk. Like, here we go again, and we get a flurry of recommendations, you know, suggestions what it's going to be. You always get a little bit of tinkering around the edges. So last time through COVID, when we got the big announcements, we had the green paper, which has sort of resulted in contributing to the levelling up and regeneration bill that's coming forward, although I don't think that's going to be done away with, but there's going to be, by the sounds of it, there's talk of some additional legislation coming out to supplement that from a planning point of view. But the big thing was about zoning, the planning system. The only thing that really came out of it that we've had from a practical point of view was the slight shaking up of the use classes order and the additional permitted development rights that follow from that, which has not been a bad thing, but compared to the big reforms that were being announced, it only amounts to really a bit of a tinkering around the edges that was needed anyway. It'll have helped things a little bit. But the problem is it is an easy political football that's used, it's genuinely used around election times in manifesto pledges because it gives you the big headline, grabs the big headlines, or it's used during a time like when we had COVID, when we had the big planning announcements through COVID. It just happened to coincide around the time when track and trace wasn't getting up and running and wasn't quite working. So it kind of detracted a little bit from that side of things. And the reality is I've lost count of how many times I've been through this now in my career, where we get the big planning reforms come in, we get as far as a consultation paper, and then it just starts to fall apart, and it just amounts to a tinkering around the edges. But we'll come on to the bigger challenges, but the bigger challenge in the planning system is not the need, well, sorry, there is a need for reform, but the bigger issue is more at ground roots level than that in terms of the resourcing in planning departments. Is the bottom line that it really comes down to.
Okay, John? Oh, you're on mute somehow.
Sorry, I think it's a money spinner for investors.
Okay, elaborate.
If something is difficult, those that persist will reap the benefits. And as Mark alluded to, if you can take a project from theory to it has planning permission, there are people who will pay a premium because they don't want the hassle of having to do that work. So if you hire the Amandas and you get Mark and other lawyers involved and you get your planning sorted, then you can sell it to people like Ed who just want to build. So actually, the fact that it's a struggle, but statistically, more applications get approved than rejected. Now, there's some distortions in that, and 60-70% get approved, but how many get withdrawn before a decision is reached? So you can cook the numbers a little. What I do find interesting, going all the way back to the Cape Barker report, maybe 15 years ago, we're under producing about 100,000 a year in housing units. And therefore we have 1.5 million missing units, supposedly. Where are these people living? Are they on the streets? I don't see an extra 1.5 million households on the streets. So what is taking up the slack? But in the meantime, property investors, particularly passive investors like myself, can see it as an opportunity to earn money, because you can use statistics. If a reasonable number of applications get approved and a reasonable number get rejected, and you spread your money around and hire the right advisors, then you will get to the other side.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Okay, so moving then sort of to wrapping up, Ed, we'll go to you then. If there are any like major challenges that you either faced in that last project or you can see, and then just a couple of lines on how you would fix it. If you were in control, if you could wave a magic wand, how would you fix the current planning application process?
Okay, so from a developer's point of view, or the person who's trying to achieve the planning uplift, I think that the challenge is keeping, if you haven't purchased the site already, and maybe entailing holding costs and whatever else, the biggest challenge is keeping the landowner who you've entered into a agreement with on board, and it's explaining the challenges and why it's taking so long, why you can't give them a fixed point when it will be resolved. So I think the challenge is the uncertainty of it, and timelines. I mean, you just, how long is a piece of string? You can never, you can be lucky, or you can you could have multiple withdrawn applications, and yeah, you're managing your situation with the landowner or your own holding costs, all whilst you know, actually trying to get to the bottom of the planning issues. And
how would you fix it then? What would be any magic wands you would wave?
Well, it's incredibly difficult to fix, because it's so politically, it's such a political issue, really. I mean, turkeys don't vote for Christmas. Approving or being in favor of housing development is not popular with the constituents anywhere, really. So it's very difficult to change that. I think it would have to be probably a new government with 5 years to burn, because it's going to be certainly a few challenging headlines to deal with if anyone was to really make a real dent in it. How they could help is improve the resourcing of the local authority. I think that's I speak to planning consultants. Most of them are originally from the local authority, and they seem to agree that providing more resources would certainly help.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, thank you for that. So we'll go Mark and then Amanda. So Mark, any big challenges you want to mention, and then how would you fix it if you were given the task of finding a solution?
I think the first one was been touched upon by Ed. So as a result of the inherent delays in the system, keeping your landowners on side can be a hugely challenging task, because they have expectations, they have plans in their minds. They've already spent the money that you've agreed in the option agreement often. And certainly we've had situations where we've had to go back and say, actually, I know we had a 2-year agreement in place, but because it's taken 7 months just to get a pre-app, effectively get a draft response from the council, we need to extend for a further 6 months, and some landowners aren't willing to do that. When it comes to dealing with their most prized asset and possession. So that's a significant challenge. The other one was touched upon by Amanda, which is the lack of resource in the council departments. And it's quite scandalous, actually. One of my other hats is that I'm the director of my family's care business, and the shortfalls in the social care sector and those in council planning departments are uncanny, both part of the public sector generally, and the bodies just aren't there. And without people physically in place to look at applications, especially those applications which are more complex, the major developments as they're called officially, applications just sit there gathering dust. And that takes time, or means time passes. And as we all know, time is money.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we go to Amanda, someone commented in the Q&A, I think it was around the fact that it's difficult to get planning and the process is slow. Isn't this to maintain a low supply and hence keep UK prices always high? Just a thought. So hello, John, if you want to grab that one before we go to Amanda.
Well, I don't think it's planned in the sense of that someone worked this up and that's the intention. I think fundamentally the problem isn't sort of the government, it's the fact that we allow individuals to have an opinion on what's being built near them. So it's most people buy a home based on what they see, the area, the schools, whatever, and they're buying into the dream of living in that place as it is. And then planning comes along and says, oh, we're going to make your neighbor's house different. We're going to put in a skyscraper next to you or something. So you suddenly get this whole change that's being applied. And it's human nature to be resistant to change, good, bad, or indifferent, but that's how we are. One way to fix planning is to eliminate the people that get to say anything about it when it comes to local constituencies. The politicians are very reactive to how people vote. So if you eliminated the people who vote from having a say, then it wouldn't affect the politicians. But I wouldn't say that the politicians have a grand view or that this is all to subsidize any one particular group. It's just human nature. And there's this sort of constant tension. And rather than an academic view of urban planning, it's, do I want the neighbor to do the extension? So.
Okay, no, it's well framed. So Amanda will give you the last word on this. If you want to mention any other challenges that haven't been mentioned currently, and then how would you? I know you've got some good strong views in this, but a good conversation the other day about this, which I found enlightening and illuminating. So you can explain how you would fix it if you were given that job.
Oh, blimey, that might put me out of the job. The biggest. The single most biggest thing that undoubtedly would be a big sea change would be sorting out the resourcing and planning departments for a kick-off. The rest of it that comes with, in terms of policy that filters down from the national level, it comes and goes anyway. The biggest challenge at that level is that, well, in theory, you've got 5-year fixed parliaments. The reality is, they don't govern for 5 years, because by the time, particularly if there's been a change in government, by the time they settle into it, you're a few months in, you get a few months, maybe if you're lucky, if they're doing a decent job, you might get a couple of years of proper governing, getting policy through. And then by the time you get a year, 18 months out from the next election, they're gearing up for a re-election. So you never get a 5-year period anyway for things to actually happen. You might get 2.5 years. Whenever there is any uncertainty of what's going on at the national level, like we have now, you get what happens from a policy point of view. The effect that has at the local level is local authorities who are progressing their development plans based on what the national policy position is, effectively down tools if there's any uncertainty that there's going to be a significant change in policy, because they're in a department that is already stretched from a resources point of view. They're not going to commit time and resources and money to progressing on a policy plan that might literally be scrapped overnight if we have a change of government. And we're in that situation now. There's a number of authorities that have effectively down tools on progressing their development plan. And that doesn't help in itself, because then that puts the question mark over the reliability of the plan-led process that those officers who are dealing with day-to-day planning applications are basing their decision-making process on. But the biggest, even aside of all of that, the biggest challenge in terms from an investor point of view and bringing sites to the table that you're wanting to push through now, obviously, then which will help to then manage the challenges that are existing with landowners and that side of things. If you've got a better resource of planning departments, better resource with the numbers of people and with the quality of attracting quality people back into local planning authorities as well, so that they can spread out the workload. Planning officers are just dealing with too many applications. That's why the timescales are going all out of kilter. A lot of the planning authorities at the moment, any number I could tell you at the minute, you've got a fixed amount. I mean, there's always a period of time to get to a validation of a planning application when you submit it. Those timescales have elongated to a ridiculous amount of time, because what a lot of authorities are essentially doing now, you put your application in, it gets validated, and then it kind of goes into a holding pile. It won't even make it onto the desk of a planning officer until that planning officer's workload has, some other applications have gone out the other end of the door, and then they'll drip feed them back in. So they're trying to manage and maintain current planning officers' workload so that they're not being overworked even more than they already are. And that is a genuine, that's the biggest challenge, is to try and manage that process.
Okay, no, absolutely fantastic. Thank you for that. I think really in summary what we're saying is that planning is certainly not for the faint-hearted. You're going to have the stomach to be in it for the long haul and deal with the ups and downs. But as John indicated, there is, because it's not easy in that sense. If it was easy, everyone would do it in life, and therefore there is an opportunity for those that do have the stomach for it, and there are certainly investors who are happy to back those that have the stomach for it and see it as an opportunity to invest in planning application deals. Given the nature of the rise of the asset, if an application is successful. So, John, any last comments before we wrap up?
Well, just a colorful example of a solution. So in a local council that I'm familiar with, it was from a deal a long time ago. Don't know if it's still going on. The developer that was backed by the crowds, but not in this platform, actually paid the council upfront a fixed amount of money, from which they were able to then hire another planner in their department as an employee. And the quid pro quo, so to speak, was if I don't have an application that's in, fine, use them as you like. When I bring a new application forward, they need to now reprioritize their workload, and mine will float to the top of the queue. It doesn't mean that it necessarily would get any more positive or negative response, but it was a way of buying a slot in the queue so that anytime this particular developer came forward with an application, they knew they would get prompt service. So paying for the fast lane at the airport or something like that. And that was an interesting one. And this developer was very comfortable paying up front because they anticipated they'd do a certain number of applications. And their fees would be offset against what they prepaid. So they were reserving capacity.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Outside the box solution. We'll end just with a comment from one of the attendees. If there are too many planning applications now, how would planning departments be able to cope if we were on target for the number of new home builds? Which is a really good point. So if it's sort of broken now and above capacity, and yet we want to try and build that 80,000 extra houses that Mark referred to, a lot of those are going to require planning approval. So all we're doing is just adding to the burden that's already overburdened. Yes, John.
So a comment on that. There's a guy I worked with when I was running a localism group, one of the central government funded pilots, and he was the head of planning for Suffolk Council. And they do hundreds of applications a year. And he said that they historically were in the 90% range when it comes to applications brought in, hitting different milestones and metrics when it comes to getting them processed and back out the other side. So while we all sort of bitch and moan about the planning process and too slow and all the rest, and it's particularly been slower during COVID, sometimes the data is actually a lot more reasonable than we think. And his point was 50% of all applications that come in are not able to be validated, missing signatures. The check wasn't for the right amount. They didn't send any money. He goes, if we could just sort the fact that the applicants can't fill out the forms and get the information in correctly, we could eliminate 50% of the failures at the first hurdle.
That's a very good point. Okay, so thank you very much to our panelists. If you had invested in Ed's planning uplift project in Bristol, keep an eye out for the update. He's about to pay back. So you'll be glad to see that when it hits your e-wallet. And Mark's project is coming soon on the platform, so you keep an eye out for that. Record your interest if you want to be sort of first in line for the information when it comes out. And planning gain experts who Amanda works with are preparing a project currently that will soon be on the platform. So a big thanks to you three for taking time to join us today. Really appreciate that. I think that'll make for a really good recording for people to go back and listen. Next week's topic, just a couple of slides to finish off. Next week's topic is serviced accommodation. We haven't done this for quite a while now. So we're going to be joined by Joanna Carr, by Mark Fernahau, and by Wendy Snedden. And they're going to join us and have a discussion around service accommodation, a bit of a hot topic. So John, before we finish off then, we always give you a fastball that you haven't seen before. We were on a shareholder webinar, and you happened to be on that as a shareholder during the week when someone alluded to Americans buying in the US, which is why I sort of smiled at the time, if you remember. So given the current economic environment, are US investors going to snap up more UK property?
The current economic environment is a very UK story right now. So the US is energy self-sufficient, a lot of fracking, therefore we don't have quite the problem with the energy issues that Europe is having given the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. We are spending billions, I think it's 17 or more billions supporting Ukraine in their efforts. So we have impacts in the US, but the point being is the dollar's stronger. And therefore, suddenly there's a big sale on. It's over at Harrods. It's called the UK property market. And anybody that has dollars can buy stuff in the UK at 10, 15% off, it looks like. This is all about currency. This is all about faux pas when it comes to politicians saying things they shouldn't say. So last time this happened, we definitely saw a spike in people buying some prime property in London. Residential, commercial, whatever. If there are transactions going on, this could warm up those investors. Property is a slow burn when it comes to the buying cycle, so therefore a temporary blip in the exchange rate isn't always the most helpful, but it does tend to increase demand. Now, I think this is an emotional thing. Americans buying in central London, Americans buying in iconic locations, Edinburgh, whatever. It does not help most of the rest of the country. It just means that the capital or some of the major cities that Americans could actually find on a map become of interest.
Okay. So if you're currently trying to sell a property asset and you get a phone call from someone with an American accent, then they could be a motivated buyer. That's the takeaway. So thanks, John, for that. Tonight, to remind people, you should have got this via an email directly to the database, but there's a project webinar tonight for the Dunlickety House project up near Inverness. Wendy and Karen will be on with the Leo crowdfunding team. Dal Ray, our investment portfolio manager, will be on that. And if you want to have a look at what's going on with this project, it's currently on the platform as view deal, which means you can actually download the equity offer document. And again, you can leave an email address and an amount you may be interested in investing to record your interest. Just means we make sure you're kept in touch with the information. So that's tonight at 7 p.m. There is the link. You can quickly screen grab that. Do you want to say something, John?
Yeah, it's a really ugly looking link. If someone goes to your website, is there an easy way to click on something to get to that?
If Dal's on, if Dal could even fire it.
No, I don't mean on this recording because it'll go away in about 30 seconds. I just meant if they go to this project, would they register? Would they get notified or something?
Yes, yeah, they will.
Okay. And so second point is anyone who is going to participate, that's great. please read the document first. This is an opportunity to ask questions and clarify points or understand things. So if you read the document first, you'll be much better prepared for this project when it comes to any live conversation this evening.
Yep, good input there. Okay, so and for those who weren't on last week, just to remind people who invested in the Newman Rose project, the Hall Barn, the second tranche, fully funded, 500,000 raised, 26 investors. That was on top of the 400,000 from the first tranche, so they raised 900,000 through the platform as a private raise. And the paperwork for that will be going out the next couple of days, so keep an eye out for that if you're in that project. And that is us. Really appreciate that today. I thought it was really interesting to hear the views of different people regarding planning. That's, John, what we're about in these webinars, is just to get people's experiences, their views, and I think that was very beneficial today.
Yeah, it was good to, arrange a conversation. And if people have further questions or comments, just drop them down below in the recording, and David and the team will then respond.
Yep, the recording will be up in about an hour's time, and you can leave your comments there. So massive thank you to Ed, to Amanda, and Mark. Thank you for coming on. Appreciate that.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
With that,
Thanks,
we'll say
everyone.
goodbye.
Take care.
See you next Thursday, 10 a.m. for service accommodation. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.